I typed every ugly truth I'd been swallowing for 2 years and hit send. The problem was, I sent it to the wrong man. Not just any wrong man. The man whose name makes Seoul's police commissioners go quiet. I'm cornered in a wet Gangnam alley. The rain is cold, but his hand pressed against the brick near my head is colder. That's when I realize his eyes aren't moving off my face. He didn't threaten me. He didn't hang up. Then he sent back 4 words that ended my entire old life. 4 words that showed me the man I loved was a lie, and the monster in front of me was my only escape. What he didn't know was that I would choose the monster. I still don't know if that accidental text was the worst thing that ever happened to me, or the thing that finally saved me. The rain in Seoul doesn't just fall. It stings. It felt like needles against my skin as I stood outside my own apartment door. I was home early. I had a tray of fresh cannoli in my hands, a surprise for Marco. But the surprise was waiting for me instead. The door was unlocked. I heard the laughter first. It was Jiun's laugh, light and high. Then I heard Marco. I dropped the tray. The sound of shattering ceramic echoed through the hallway. When I walked into the bedroom, they didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. Jiun, my only employee. My best friend. Marco, the man I had moved across the world for. Sophia, Marco said, standing up slowly. He didn't rush to cover himself. He didn't apologize. You were always home too late anyway. You love that bakery more than me. The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my lungs. My chest burned. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just turned around and walked out into the night. I headed straight for Fiore, my patisserie. It was the only place that felt safe. I locked myself in the dark kitchen. The smell of sugar and yeast usually calmed me. Tonight, it felt like rot. I pulled out my phone. My vision was blurred with tears. I opened the last message thread and started typing. I poured every bit of poison I'd been holding back into that screen. I called him a coward. I told him he was a parasite. I told him I hoped he choked on the life he'd stolen from me. I hit send. I stared at the screen, waiting for the blue bubble to turn to delivered. But that's when my heart stopped. The name at the top of the screen didn't say Marco. It was a string of numbers. A contact I'd saved as Friday VIP booking a few hours ago. I had sent the most hateful, private message of my life to a stranger. My breath hitched. I tried to unsend it, but it was too late. The message was gone. I sat there in the dark, shaking. I expected silence. I expected the stranger to block me, or ignore the crazy woman texting at 1 a.m. Then the 3 gray dots appeared. Someone was typing back. My phone buzzed in my hand, the vibration feeling like an electric shock. A message popped up. It was in Korean first, then English. Wrong number. Come anyway. Before I could process that, another text followed. An address in Gangnam. A place I knew only by reputation. You have until midnight, the final text read. I don't repeat myself. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:07 p.m. What he didn't know was that I had nothing left to lose. My home was gone. My relationship was a lie. My business felt like a tomb. I grabbed my coat. I didn't know who was on the other end of that phone. I didn't know that by the time the sun rose, my life would be over. I stepped out into the rain and hailed a taxi. Gangnam, I whispered. The driver looked at the address and went pale. He didn't ask questions. He just drove. As we pulled up to a dark, steel door with no handle, my phone buzzed one last time. I see you, Sophia. The taxi pulled away, leaving me standing in front of that cold steel door. The rain was coming down harder now. It soaked through my thin coat. It felt like the city was trying to wash me away. I stared at the address on my phone. Hyukyun. Black smoke. I had lived in Seoul for 5 years, but I had never heard of this place. But I knew someone who would. I stepped under a small shop awning and dialed the only number I trusted. Mr. Beck. He was my flower supplier. He was 70 years old and had seen Seoul change from ruins to skyscrapers. He was the closest thing I had to a father here. The phone rang 3 times. Sophia, his voice was raspy and warm. Why are you calling so late? Is the oven broken again? Mr. Beck, I whispered, my voice cracking. I made a mistake. A big one. I told him about the text. I told him about the reply. I told him the name of the club. The line went dead quiet. I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. I could hear his heavy, rhythmic breathing. Mr. Beck? Then he finally spoke. His voice wasn't warm anymore. It sounded like dry leaves scraping on pavement. Sophia, listen to me carefully, he said. Whatever you did, go and apologize. Right now. I don't even know who he is, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. He is the shadow over this city, Mr. Beck replied. Do not make him wait. Do not make excuses. And whatever you do, do not lie to him. The line clicked. He hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone. Mr. Beck had lived through wars and riots. I had never heard him sound afraid. Until now. That's when the fear shifted. It wasn't a sharp sting anymore. It was a cold, heavy weight in my stomach. I looked at the clock. 11:42 p.m., 18 minutes left. I could run. I could go to the airport and leave it all behind. What he didn't know was that I had worked too hard for Fiore. I had bled for that pastry. If this man could take it away with one phone call, I had to face him. I walked back to the steel door. There was no handle, no doorbell. Suddenly, a small slit in the metal slid open. A pair of dark, unblinking eyes looked out at me. Sophia Bellini, I said. My voice was steady, even if my hands weren't. The heavy door groaned as it swung inward. A man stood there. He was built like a mountain, his suit tight across his shoulders. He didn't say a word. He just stepped aside and pointed down a long, dark corridor. The air inside smelled of expensive tobacco and something sharp, like ozone before a storm. I took a step forward. Each click of my heels on the stone floor sounded like a countdown. I reached the end of the hallway. Two more men stood outside a set of double oak doors. They didn't check my bag. They didn't touch me. They just opened the doors. The room was vast and dim. A cello was playing somewhere, a low morning sound. At the far end of the room, a man stood by a floor-to-ceiling window. He was watching the rain. You're late, he said. He didn't turn around, but I felt his gaze like a physical touch. 3 minutes late, Sophia. The man finally turned around. He was exactly what the thumbnail showed. A black suit, an open collar, and eyes that didn't seem to blink. He was younger than I expected, but his energy was heavy. It filled every corner of the room. I didn't move. I didn't apologize for being late. I just stood there with the rain still dripping from my hair. You called me a coward, he said. His voice was low and even. You said you hoped I choked. Those are interesting words to send to a stranger. He took a step toward me. I felt the urge to back away, but I forced my feet to stay still. I sent that to my fiancée, I whispered. It was a mistake. But he didn't look convinced. He walked to a large mahogany desk and picked up a tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. My heart plummeted. It was a photo of my pastry Fiore. Then another of my business license. Then a grainy photo of Marco, taken just yesterday outside a building I didn't recognize. I don't believe in mistakes, Sophia, he said. He sat on the edge of the desk, invading my space without even touching me. And I definitely don't believe in coincidences. How do you have these? I asked. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hide them behind my back. Then he leaned in closer. I could smell his expensive cologne. It was clean and sharp, like the air after a lightning strike. My name is Lee Do-hyun, he said. In this city, nothing happens without me knowing why. Especially when it involves the Shin faction. I shook my head. I don't know who that is. I just make pastries. That's when he dropped the tablet on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot. Marco Ricci isn't just a cheating boyfriend, Sophia, Do-hyun said. His eyes were cold, like chips of black glass. He's been busy while you were sleeping. He pulled a physical file from a drawer and tossed it in front of me. I saw bank statements. I saw delivery logs for my kitchen that I had never signed. Your fiancé has been using your kitchen as a cash drop for 6 months, he said. He's been cleaning dirty money for my rivals right under your nose. I felt the room tilt. The flour, the sugar, the late nights. It was all a front for something disgusting. What he didn't know was that Marco handled all the digital accounts. I had trusted him with everything. I had no idea, I gasped. I'll go to the police. I'll tell them. The police? Do-hyun laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're on the paperwork, Sophia. Your name. Your visa. Your fingerprints. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just inches from me. You aren't just a wrong number anymore, he whispered, his voice vibrating in my chest. You are evidence. And in my world, evidence is either used or destroyed. I felt the air leave my lungs. Destroyed, I whispered. My voice sounded small in the massive room. Do-hyun didn't blink. He just watched me struggle. He looked like a man watching an ant decide which way to run. The Shin faction is moving into my territory, he said. He began to pace. They used your shop because it's clean. They used you because you're a foreigner. You're the perfect shield. But I wasn't a shield. I was a person whose life was currently melting into a puddle of black ink. I have a choice for you, Sophia, he continued. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. Option 1 is simple. I call my contacts. I hand over the evidence of the money laundering. That sounds like the right thing to do, I said. He leaned in, a cold smile touching his lips. It is. But the paperwork has your signature. You'll be arrested. Your pastry will be seized. Your visa will be cancelled. You'll leave Korea in handcuffs. The room felt like it was shrinking. I thought of Fiore. I thought of the 5 years I had spent sweating over dough and balancing books. And option 2? I asked. My throat was dry. The Hyuk-yun annual gathering, he said. In 10 days, the most powerful people in the underworld meet. The Shin family will be there. They think they own you. Then he stepped into my personal space. He was so close I could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes. You stay with me for those 10 days, he said. You move into my penthouse. You attend the gathering as my companion. If you are with me, the Shin family can't touch you. You become protected. You want me to be your fake girlfriend? I asked. It sounded like a bad movie. I want you to be a signal, he corrected. A signal that I have already neutralized their play. After the gathering, I'll clear your accounts. I'll make the money disappear. You walk away clean. Fiore stays yours. It was a deal with the devil. I knew it. That's when I thought of Marco. He was probably with Ji-yeon right now, laughing at me. He had turned my dream into a crime scene. Why me? I asked. You could hire a professional. A professional can be bought, Do-hyun said. You have something better. You have a reason to hate them. I looked at his outstretched hand. It was steady. Strong. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just doing this to save my shop. I was doing it because I wanted to see the look on Marco's face when he realized he picked the wrong woman to betray. I reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm. 10 days, I said. Do-hyun gripped my hand firmly. He didn't let go. He pulled me slightly closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. One rule, Sophia, he said. In front of anyone who matters, you look at me like you chose me. A black sedan arrived at my apartment at sunrise. My pastry Fiore was already closed for renovations. Do-hyun's people were fast. They were professionals. The penthouse was at the top of a glass tower overlooking the Han River. It was cold. It was perfect. There were no photos on the walls. No mess. Just floor-to-ceiling windows and the quiet hum of the city below. In the guest suite, a new wardrobe was waiting. Every dress was my exact size. On the dressing table sat a single jade bracelet. There was a note in sharp, heavy handwriting. Wear this. It is recognizable to the people who need to recognize it. I slipped it on. The stone was heavy and cool against my skin. But the beauty of the room couldn't hide the pressure. At breakfast, a woman walked in. Her name was Seo Yerin, Do-hyun's second-in-command. She looked at me like I was a recipe she was about to throw out. She's too soft, Yerin said in Korean. She didn't know I understood her. I kept my face blank. I kept eating. The Shin family will see right through her, Yerin continued, her eyes locking onto mine. If she cracks at the gathering, we all go down. Then she leaned over the table. Don't get comfortable, pastry chef, she whispered in English. In this house, the only thing more dangerous than the enemies outside is the truth inside. Yaren left, and the silence returned. I walked toward the balcony to clear my head. That's when I heard Do-hyun's voice from the office. The door was cracked open. If Marco Ricci surfaces before the gathering, bring him to me, Do-hyun said. His voice was flat, like stone. Do not let the Shin people find him first. My heart skipped a beat. He was protecting Marco, the man who betrayed me, the man who nearly destroyed my life. What he didn't know was that I was listening. I wanted to burst in and scream. Why was the man who promised to save me protecting the man who hurt me? I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. Was I just a pawn in a bigger game? I looked at the jade bracelet on my wrist. It felt less like jewelry and more like a shackle. Do-hyun had said I was evidence, but he hadn't told me everything. The threat wasn't just coming from a rival family. It was coming from inside this tower. I realized then that Sofia Bellini, the pastry chef from Milan, was gone. I was in the middle of a war, and the man I was supposed to trust was keeping my greatest enemy alive. I had to know why. What did Do-hyun need Marco for? Jeju Island was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. The resort was hidden behind high stone walls and armed guards. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and dangerous secrets. I wore deep burgundy silk. The dress felt like armor, but it didn't stop my heart from racing. The welcome dinner was a sea of black suits and sharp smiles. Every eye in the room followed me. I wasn't just a guest. I was a target. Stay close, Do-hyun whispered. He didn't look at me, but his hand was steady on the small of my back. But someone was watching us more closely than the rest. Chairman Oh, the leader of the Shin faction, sat across the room. He was smooth and polished. He watched me like a scientist watching a reaction he'd already planned. Then I saw him. Lee Jae-won, Do-hyun's younger brother. He looked softer than Do-hyun, more nervous. When his eyes landed on me, he didn't look angry. He didn't look suspicious. He looked relieved. That's when the chill hit me. Why would the man trying to destroy this family be happy to see me? I tried to focus on the food, but it tasted like ash. I felt like a prop in a play I hadn't read the script for. Every laugh in the room sounded like a threat. Every clink of a glass sounded like a countdown. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was starting to see the cracks in their perfect world. The dinner ended in a blur of polite nods and hidden insults. Do-hyun walked me back to our private suite. The silence between us was heavy. He stopped at the doorway, his silhouette dark against the hall lights. He looked at me for a long time. The mask of the crime lord slipped for just a second. Tomorrow will be the most dangerous room you have ever stood in, he said. His voice was low, almost a ghost of a sound. I opened my mouth to speak, but he held up a hand. And I need you to know something, he continued. If something happens, if it all goes wrong, you were never involved. He didn't wait for an answer. I'll make sure of that, he added. He closed the door, leaving me alone in the dark. I looked at the jade bracelet on my wrist. It glowed in the dim light. I realized then that Do-hyun wasn't just preparing for a meeting. He was preparing for a goodbye. The grand ballroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, but the light felt cold. I stood beside Do-hyun, my hand resting on his arm. His muscles were like iron, but the doors at the back of the hall suddenly swung open. The sound echoed like a gunshot. 2 men in sharp suits stepped inside. Between them was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. It was Marco. My breath hitched. He looked pale and broken. He didn't look like the man I once loved. He looked like a ghost. Chairman O stepped forward, a smug smile playing on his lips. I have brought a witness, O announced to the room. A man who can prove that Lee Do-hyun is not a leader. He is a predator. Then Marco began to speak. His voice was shaky. He told a story I didn't recognize. He told the room that Do-hyun had kidnapped me. He said Do-hyun was holding me under duress and using my pastry for his own crimes. He was painting me as a victim and Do-hyun as a monster. The room began to murmur. Powerful men looked at each other. If Do Hyun was using innocent civilians, he was breaking the code. He would lose everything. That's when Do Hyun turned to look at me. He didn't defend himself. He didn't shout. He just waited. He put his entire life in my hands. I felt the weight of every eye in the room. I felt the heat of the jade bracelet on my wrist. I let go of Do Hyun's arm and walked to the center of the floor. My heels clicked against the marble. I looked at Marco, the man who had cheated on me, the man who had used my kitchen to hide dirty money. Marco is lying, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the ballroom. I wasn't kidnapped, I continued. I walked into Hyuk-yeon on my own 2 feet. I sent a text to the wrong man, and that man gave me a choice. I looked at Chairman O. I looked at the dangerous men surrounding me. He offered to save my business from the mess Marco made, I said. He treated me with more respect in 10 days than Marco did in 2 years. What he didn't know, what Chairman O didn't realize, was that the truth is the most dangerous weapon in a room full of lies. The murmurs stopped. The room went dead still. A tall, white-haired man at the front of the room began to clap. Slowly. "A brave girl," he whispered. But Chairman O wasn't finished. His face twisted with rage. He looked at Marco, then back at me. "You think words will save him?" O hissed. He reached into his jacket, and the guards in the room reached for theirs. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. The darkness in the ballroom didn't last long. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows across the marble floor. Chairman O was gone. Marco was gone. The room was a whirlwind of shouting men and rushing guards. But Do Hyun didn't move. He stood like a statue in the center of the chaos, his eyes fixed only on me. "We're leaving," he said. We didn't go back to the party. We walked out onto a wide stone terrace overlooking the black Jeju Sea. The air was salt-heavy and freezing. I leaned against the railing. My heart was finally slowing down, but my hands were still numb. "You could have walked out clean tonight," Do Hyun said after a long silence. He stood a few feet away, his back to the light. "Oh, would have arranged everything," he continued. "New identity. Settled accounts. Fiore debt wiped away. All you had to do was let them tell your story for you." I looked at the waves crashing against the rocks below. "I didn't like their version," I whispered. Then the silence stretched between us again. It wasn't the heavy, dangerous silence from the first night in the alley. It felt different. Fragile. "What happens to J1?" I asked. Do Hyun looked out at the water. His expression was unreadable. "Nothing tonight," he replied softly. "He is still my brother." That's when I realized the truth about him. He ran an empire built on fear and power. But deep inside, he had one door that stayed unlocked. And his brother had almost burned the whole house down because of it. He turned to face me. The cold wind caught his hair. "The 10 days are finished, Miss Bellini," he said. His voice was formal again. "You are free to go." I looked at him. I thought about my empty apartment. I thought about the smell of flour and the quiet life I had tried to build. What he didn't know was that I didn't want to go back to being the girl who let things happen to her. I didn't move. I said slowly, "I want to reopen Fiore." I took a breath. "There's a space in a building your company owns," I told him. "On Upgyujongaro. I've walked past it 50 times. A tiny flash of something, was it a smile, touched the corner of his mouth. "The lease terms are negotiable," he said. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "But the landlord is very demanding." 6 weeks later, the smell of butter and citrus filled the air of Upgyujongaro. Fiore was back. But it wasn't the small, hidden shop in Itaewon anymore. This place had high ceilings and marble counters. There was a line around the block before the sun even hit the pavement. I was behind the counter at 6 a.m. My hands were white with flour. My back ached in the best way possible. I was building something that was finally truly mine. Then, at exactly 8 a.m., a sleek black car idled at the curb. The shop went a little quieter. The customers didn't know why, but they felt the shift in the air. The door chimed. Do Hyun walked in. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and the expression of a man who was only there for a quick meeting. He didn't look at me at first. He sat at a small table by the window and opened his laptop. That's when I noticed the jade bracelet was still on my wrist. I never gave it back. He never asked for it. I didn't wait for him to order. I didn't wait for a server to move. I walked over and set a steaming espresso on his table. Beside it, I placed a yuzu cornetto. I didn't order that, he said, looking up. His dark eyes were just as intense as the night in the alley. I know, I said, meeting his gaze. It's on the house. He didn't smile, but the tension in his shoulders dropped just an inch. He picked up the pastry. What he didn't know was that I wasn't the same woman who had sent that panicked text. I had been used by a coward and watched over by a monster. But in the end, I was the one standing in the center of the room. I didn't fall in love with Lee Do-hyun because he saved me. I fell in love with him because he was the first person who let me save myself. And that is the only kind of love worth keeping. I turned to walk back to the kitchen, but then the front door chimed again. A man in a dark hoodie stepped inside. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at the pastries. He looked directly at the back of Do-hyun's head and reached into his pocket. The espresso cup in Do-hyun's hand stopped halfway to his lips. Sophia, Do-hyun said, his voice a low warning. Get behind the counter. Now.